Hi class, lots to cover in this lecture today. This is over style and types in fiction and nonfiction. I'm going to go over some of the blanks on the outline, and I made a few corrections to it, and I will post the corrected version to our course. But I can't cover everything because I don't want this lecture to be longer than 15 minutes. So make sure that you do attend to the portions that I don't discuss right now. Okay? Love George Bernard Shaw's beginning here because, as you know, George Bernard Shaw had lots of style, so that he is one who can say, if you have nothing to assert, you have no style. And I know that is not any of you. Okay. Make sure you really are comfortable with using the term style. I advise you to look it up. Okay. I think you know that, but it's always good to be able to articulate a definition. I look things up all the time so I can use precise definitions in my work. Okay. What are some new stylistic devices to consider when selecting and analyzing prose? Okay, that's right there. By that I mean you're not going to throw out or jettison what we did with poetry. However, there's some things that are unique to prose that we want to add to our discussion. Likewise, we will have a similar segue when we get to drama. Okay, you first want to look at the overall organization of the piece that you choose. Let me pause a moment and talk about the piece that you choose real quickly here. Remember that prose, there are many different subgenres in the genre prose. Okay, so you need to pick what you want to work with. Your book goes over tons of them, so I'm not going to do that here. But once you identify either an excerpt or a cut, you want to be careful. An excerpt should be a piece from within the greater body of the text that has its own beginning, middle, and end. That there's something to build to. As a performer, you want there to be a moment that you're working to in your performance. If there's not, it can be hard to really incorporate that variety and nuance we're looking for. Alternately, you could do a cut, and in a cut, what you would do, let's say you wanted to focus on character development, you could pick a certain moment at the beginning of the story, a moment in the middle, and a moment at the end, and you cut those pieces together. You have 1, 2, and 3, and you put them together. When you are presenting, you can even step out of the narrator role or out of the text for a moment and in your own voice, your introduction voice, say, 2 days later, we see the character involved in this. And so you can kind of use your own introduction voice in between those cuts to help your audience connect the 3 moments you've pieced together. So I just wanted to remind you that you can do an excerpt or a cut. Some of you will perform a prose piece in its entirety, but probably not too many because most prose selections are longer. Okay? All right, so once you've chosen your piece, there are 4 different ways that any writing really can be organized, especially prose. Spatial, that is by the way things appear in space. This is generally a descriptive essay with less of a climax, but can be nonetheless very interesting. Logical, this is where you want to prove a point before the rest of the paper will make sense. It's how I think of it. For example, if you were going to write about recycling, okay, you might first prove that there is an abundance of trash that is not being well used in Lakeland. And you could give me some statistics, some facts, developing this idea that we are wasting. After that, it would be logical or more persuasive for you now to tell me what are 3 steps I can take to be better at recycling. Okay, so there's a logical order when what follows makes more sense based on what came before. Okay, then you have chronological, which of course can mean straightforward, beginning to end, but it can also include techniques like flashback, flash forward. If you're into structuralism or narratology, analepsis, prolepsis, these are all ways of ordering events to create interest. Sometimes it's great to tell a story beginning to end, but sometimes it's more interesting to tell the end first. For example, if the story opens with a character in the hospital room and there's, machines attached to him and tubes and everything else, we're like, whoa, how did you get there? Okay. And then the story goes on to tell about this horrible accident. Okay. So that can create a kind of interest. So when you choose chronological as the order of your development, keep in mind it doesn't have to be straight through. And the last one is order of emphasis, which just means order of importance. It's usually signified by words like first, second, third, moreover, however, furthermore. These all indicate that you are organizing your ideas by emphasis. It's common in an essay. And some of you may do an essay. There are some great essays out there. I think in advanced expository writing with Dr. Cotton, you may have read some that are really awesome, so don't be afraid to use those. What are some other criteria? You're looking at how a central idea is being developed through paragraph order and connection. You're also looking at specific sentence considerations. We call them syntactical considerations. One is the length of the sentence, and each of these lengths have a different effect on the reader or the audience. For example, a short sentence tends to actually slow down the pace because you've got more periods, one at the beginning and one at the end, kind of, isolating that short sentence. They tend to be immediate. They tend to emphasize something. They often are a point in a passage where something of great importance is lodged. Some of the shortest sentences in history are some of the most memorable, like, Jesus wept. So short sentences are of great emphasis and interest. Telegraphic is super short, like 3 or less. Short is usually 5. Long, and then long and involved. And those are the length classifications. Then you have rhetorical, which we're going to do more work with this in the workshop next week. So your book hints at these things. You may have studied them in the past, perhaps in advanced grammar. You can look them up, but they are great for analysis. The good thing about a prose piece is every prose piece has sentences. So these things will be at work. It wasn't like in poetry where you went, do they have a syndeton here? No, okay, you don't have to do that in prose. They all have sentences. They're all going to have these features. I'd like to talk more about the sentence types, but we'll run out of time. So do make sure you understand those, and we'll work on that next week some more. Then there are some other common classifications, the types: simple, compound, complex, and then the functions: declarative and imperative, interrogative. You might wonder, how could identifying sentence type aid in the development of my analysis? Well, let's talk about a scene in Great Expectations between Pip and Miss Havisham. In that scene, one of the first scenes when he enters her house, Miss Havisham uses a lot of imperative sentences. Boy, play cards. Boy, do this. Boy, come upstairs. Okay, it's not exactly like that. I'm just kind of pulling this from my memory. But then Pip asks more questions. He speaks in interrogative sentences. And I think his use of the question shows his insecurity and his search for identity, even in that moment. So sentence styles can really do a lot that way. Similarly, you can always look for active and passive voice. I didn't put that on there, but if a character is always speaking in active voice, there's a measure of certainty implied in that. I think of The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. There's a moment in there where one of the characters, who's a big, burly, kind of muscular dude, and he's always talking in passive voice about how his wife divorced him. And Hemingway's constant use of passive voice ends up belying or working against this image of a strong man. And we learn he really might be strong on the outside, but he's weak on the inside. So these are some sentence considerations, and I would also consider active and passive voice there. Okay. You also look at paragraph features. Okay. Those were some that we just hinted up there, but the paragraph features, you're looking at the links. We have short paragraphs. What does a short paragraph do? It is a stylistic move. It's not because the author ran out of things to say. Okay, it's a transition, a point of emphasis. One of my favorite short paragraphs is by Shelby Steele in The Content of Their Character, an essay he writes, and it's a 2-sentence short paragraph, and the first sentence echoes all that just came in the essay, and the next sentence predicts what's to come. It's a pretty cool sentence. I should share it with you sometime. Okay. All right. We talked about some of those. Paragraph climax. Your book thinks that each paragraph has a climax. You can spend some time determining that. What's most important to me is that your performance is not just one moment, but that there's little moments that we're building to, that there's a few places that you highlighted. Okay. In addition to paragraph level features, we have sentence level features. We already hit some of those above, okay, but there's some more. Keep in mind that the 2 greatest points of emphasis in a sentence are its beginning and its end, with the greatest point being the end. You don't want to lodge, generally, the important idea in the middle of a sentence. It'll get read over or not processed. If an author does do that, puts the most important idea in the middle of a sentence, it's worth noting. They're trying to they're demanding a lot of the reader. They're glossing something over or veiling it, demanding much of you. It sounds like something a modernist would do. So you want to look at the point of emphasis as being at the beginning or at the end. Likewise, apply that to your own writing. In your thesis statements, your last 4 or 5 words should be the bang. In your conclusion, your last 2 or 3 words should be the bang, because the greatest moment of emphasis is at the end of a sentence. Okay. Attend to punctuation carefully. This is one of my favorite things. I know, that's funny, right? But punctuation means so much, and we are so used to it, we reread over it, right? But like I encourage you to look up style and be able to have a really precise definition of that, you want to be able to precisely discuss punctuation And again, every prose piece has punctuation. Worry not that you'll have enough techniques to analyze, okay? So semicolon, what is that? Why do they use a semicolon instead of a period here? What's the different effect, okay? Generally, a semicolon means a turn of thought or it explains a preceding cause. My example, I wore a down jacket to the stadium. It was the coldest day of the year. Okay, why did you wear a down jacket? It was cold. I ate 10 sandwiches. I was really hungry. Okay, so the second clause explains the first. The other one is a set of a moment of contrast, like I was tall, she was short. Okay, there's a moment of contrast here. A semicolon helps you to tease out and identify that contrast. Parentheses and dashes, what do these do? If you've got a passage that has these, I know you can comment on parentheses and dashes pretty well. Why a dash instead of a comma? Why a parenthesis instead of a footnote? So if you can consider these types of questions, you might be able to answer what is the effect of this punctuation on this passage. The dash or colon, again, these are more abrupt or stronger punctuation marks. I always think of a colon as being stronger than a period because it's two, okay, but a period is very strong. It is an end stop, but a colon I might think is a little more dramatic. Here, one note for you, dashes and colons often mark a pause just before summing up and reference words before the mark. You'll see after a colon, a lot of times you have a complete sentence, then the colon, and after it is either a noun that renames or modifies something that came before. And by that word after the colon connecting to what came before, or the dash, there's a unity created in the text. It's a fabulous coherence creating device. It's great for you as a performer to be aware of and as a writer. The word level features, I think you know most of those from poetry, but there are two that I want to highlight as pertaining to prose particularly. One is verb tense. You can always tell and analyze the verb tense in a passage. Past tense, there's maybe a nostalgic feel or reflective feel. Present tense is going to be more immediate. In my one of my literature classes, we take that piece by Alice Walker, one about the world in her eye, and it's told in present tense when she's talking about the moment where she's shot. And often I'll take that passage and we'll rewrite it in past, and the immediacy, the effect of being shot in the eye is gone. So you really want to look, are you in past, present? Are there moments of future tense? Are there moments where the tense shifts? What's going on? You can always make something of the tense, particularly if your narrator is telling a story about something that happened to him or her long ago. Then you have the lens, you have the narrator looking through the lens of the past, and you determine that by looking at the verbs. The other thing to look at that we haven't before is diction level. You really want to be able to comment on this, particularly it's how it helps create a tone or a mood of the essay. And I just referenced a few things that you might consider. Are the words polysyllabic, monosyllabic? Are they concrete very often? Are they abstract? If you maybe have a scientific article or you're dealing with some kind of idea like about freedom or love. Are they Latinate? Likewise, they could be they could be French or Germanic, but Latinate tends to be more common for some of the text I've seen. And vernacular, are they specific? Are they words that are understood by a specific field or specific discipline? You might also add, like, are they particular to a particular group or geography, a dialect, okay? All right, you know the sounds of words. Narrative implications are the next essay or the next lecture. So I will see you when you read that next one, or when you see the next one. Bye.